I never thought a wedding would be the day I finally found myself. The grandeur of the room felt overwhelming. Rows of pristine white tables, each adorned with golden cutlery and sparkling crystal glasses, all bathed in soft candlelight. The guests, dressed in their designer best, moved like a sea of perfection, smiles painted on their faces, their laughter echoing off the high ceilings. The air smelled like luxury, expensive perfume, fresh flowers, and a touch of champagne. The bride, Camille, walked down the aisle in a gown so intricate it seemed to float behind her like a cloud of silk. Diamonds caught the light, dancing around her neck as her eyes locked only with her groom, Bryce. The world around her blurred as she was the center of attention, a vision of wealth and beauty. But for me, sitting there, it felt like I was watching from the sidelines of a world I would never truly belong to. I'd never imagined I'd be here, in this moment, watching my own son marry the woman of his dreams, the woman he'd chosen over me, the woman who had no place for me in her world of designer labels and gleaming jewels. And yet, here I was. I thought of the years I had spent raising Bryce, teaching him to value love and family above all else. Those long, quiet nights, working 2 jobs to make ends meet, and still finding a way to show him that no matter how little we had, we always had each other. But today, as I sat at this lavish event, I realized just how little I seemed to matter anymore. I watched as the wedding coordinator walked over to me. With a polite, practiced smile, she gestured for me to follow her. She led me past row after row of perfectly placed guests, and I knew without asking that I wasn't going to be seated anywhere near the front. Row 14, behind the service area. I could feel the stares as I walked, their eyes gliding over me like I was invisible. Whispers followed in my wake, mocking whispers, my hands clenched into fists, but I didn't cry. I wouldn't let them see me break. I took my seat, feeling the cold chair beneath me, the glass-eyed gazes of those around me like daggers. As I sat there, I heard the sharp, condescending voice of my daughter, Camille's mother, Patricia, as she whispered to a friend, just loud enough for me to hear, "Is that the groom's mother? I heard she taught at some public school. Can you believe she's here, looking like that?" How embarrassing for Bryce. It stung, but I refused to let it show. I kept my back straight, my hands folded tightly in my lap. No matter how much they looked down on me, I knew who I was. I'd worked hard for everything I had, and I'd given everything to my son. But as I looked up and saw my son Bryce, standing at the front with Camille, a part of me shattered. He looked so different, distant, unrecognizable in his sharp suit. The boy I raised was gone. He was now a man who had forgotten what it was like to struggle, to fight for a place at the table. He didn't look at me, not once. And in that moment, I understood. This wedding, this day, it wasn't just about the union of 2 people. It was about me, too, about finding my place, not in the grand halls of wealth, but in the heart of my own self-respect. I wasn't invisible, not yet, but they were making me feel like I was, and I would never let them forget that. I may be sitting at the back, but I'll carry myself as if I belong at the front. The whispers began almost immediately after I sat down. They were subtle at first, little murmurs that floated in the air, sharp and pointed, like knives wrapped in velvet. It was the tone of polite disdain, the kind you use when you don't want to seem rude, but you still want to make it clear that you don't quite belong. "Did you hear? That's the groom's mother. Can you believe she taught at a public school? She's from the South Side, isn't she? I hear she barely makes ends meet." I felt my cheeks flush, but I didn't look up. I didn't acknowledge them. Instead, I straightened my back and placed my hands neatly in my lap. It didn't matter that I was sitting in the very last row, behind the service area. It didn't matter that I was the only one there without a designer gown or sparkling jewels. I had worked harder than anyone to get here, and I would not let their words define me. The chair felt cold and hard, like the world had placed me in a spot where I was meant to be forgotten. But I wouldn't let them forget me. I would hold my head high. The whispers continued. "I saw her at the grocery store last week. I wonder if she ever gets a break from that tiny house." No wonder Bryce wanted to distance himself from all that. The words stung. Bryce, my son, the boy I had raised with everything I had. I had worked countless hours, juggled jobs just to provide for him. And yet, here I was seated in the back of his wedding, ignored, dismissed. I glanced at him, standing at the front, all smiles and laughter with Camille. He didn't even look at me. His eyes didn't meet mine. His body language screamed discomfort, like I was the last person he wanted at his wedding. I could see it in the way he stood stiff, cold, distant. The boy who used to bring me dandelions when he was little, telling me I was the prettiest woman in the world, was gone. In his place was a man who barely remembered who I was. I swallowed the lump in my throat. The pain was sharp, but it was familiar. I had endured far worse than this in my life. But this was different. This humiliation came from my own flesh and blood. The realization hit me like a wave. This wasn't just about a wedding. It wasn't just about a mother who was forced to sit in the back. This was about me. This was my moment. I could sit here and continue to shrink into the shadows. Or I could rise. I could let this day, this humiliation, define me. Or I could choose to take control. I could choose to regain my dignity, not by begging for it from others, but by standing firm in my own self-respect. I may be sitting in the back, but that didn't mean I didn't belong here. This was my son's wedding. Yes, but it was also my story, my journey. I had been taught, from a young age, that life wasn't always fair, that sometimes you would be overlooked, even by those you loved the most. But what I hadn't been taught was that I had the power to reclaim my own worth. I didn't need anyone's validation, not from Bryce, not from Camille, and certainly not from the guests who whispered behind my back. This was my moment to take back the dignity that had been stripped away over the years. I had worked too hard, loved too deeply, and sacrificed too much to let a few whispers steal my self-respect. I glanced around, at the glittering chandeliers, the sparkling glasses of champagne, the perfectly dressed guests. All of it seemed so far removed from the world I had known. But then, I remembered something. It didn't matter how much money they had. It didn't matter how perfect their lives looked on the outside. None of it mattered in the face of real strength. I had been through so much. I had raised my son with love, even when the world told me I wasn't enough. I had been the one who stayed up late, who worked through the nights, who cleaned up the messes. I had been the one who held him when he cried. And I had been the one who wiped his tears away. Today, I would remind myself of that strength. I would remind myself that no matter where I was sitting, no matter how they tried to erase me from the picture, I had a place, and that place was my own. I wasn't going to let this wedding define me. I wasn't going to let this moment break me. I would hold my head high. The quiet hum of the wedding ceremony filled the air, but I couldn't focus on any of it. I could feel the weight of my seat in row 14, far behind the glittering crowd. The whispers still swirled around me like invisible hands, pushing me further into the shadows. I had become part of the scenery, the kind of thing people noticed only when it didn't belong then. Just as I was starting to shrink inside myself, I felt a shift of presence beside me. I turned, half expecting someone to ask me to move, as if I had somehow taken someone else's seat. But no, a man, a silver-haired figure in a tailored black suit, had settled next to me. His movements slow and deliberate. His suit was impeccable, and he wore an air of quiet confidence. I blinked, wondering if perhaps he had made a mistake. This wasn't a place for someone like him. The front rows were for people like him. For a brief moment, I thought he might get up and walk away, realizing the seating error, but instead, he leaned in slightly, his voice soft yet steady. "Let's pretend we came together." It was as if he had stepped into my mind and heard the storm of thought swirling there. My heart skipped. I wasn't invisible anymore. He had seen me, not just a poor, aging mother sitting in the back, but someone worthy of being acknowledged, worthy of companionship. I didn't know what to say, so I simply nodded, the smallest of smiles tugging at my lips. In that instant, the tension inside me started to unravel. This stranger, this man who didn't know me, had done something so simple, so kind, that it felt like a gentle hand had lifted me from the pit of humiliation. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel like I was the odd one out. The whispers around me softened, then shifted. They were no longer about my poverty, or the oddity of my presence at this luxurious wedding. Now, there was a new focus. Eyes turned toward the man sitting next to me, their curiosity piqued. Who is he? Why is he with her? Is he someone important? The murmurings grew louder, but not with judgment anymore. Now, they were full of intrigue, even respect. They saw him, and they saw me not as the poor, discarded mother in the back, but as two people sharing a moment of quiet solidarity. I felt a shift in the atmosphere. The power dynamic in the room began to change. Suddenly, the guests who had once whispered about me seemed to be looking in our direction. Not with disdain, but with curiosity. I had been invisible, But now, I was seen. And I wasn't invisible because of my son's wedding, or the money I didn't have. I was seen because of my dignity, because I had found someone who had offered me kindness without an agenda. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged, not in their world of glittering diamonds and designer dresses, but in my own, where kindness mattered more than wealth, where respect was given and not earned through status. The man beside me, who remained silent most of the time, had shifted something deep within me. It was more than just the gesture of sitting beside me. It was the realization that I was worthy of this, of respect, of kindness, of being noticed for who I was, not what I had. And for a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to bask in that feeling. I glanced at Bryce, standing at the altar, his back to me. He hadn't noticed the subtle shift yet. He was still caught up in his perfect wedding day, his mind too far removed from me to see what was happening in the back row. But I didn't mind. For once, I didn't need him to see me. I didn't need him to validate me. The man beside me had done something far more meaningful. He had given me something more powerful than the respect I'd been yearning for all these years. He had given me the courage to claim it for myself. As I sat there beside Sebastian, a quiet decision began to form inside me. The weight of the whispers, the sharp sting of being overlooked, it was all there, hovering in the air. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to respond with anger or frustration. I didn't need to shout, to demand attention, to fight back. The truth was, I had spent too many years fighting battles that weren't mine to fight. My son, my family, they had their expectations, their judgments, and their demands. But I was learning, in this moment, that I didn't have to fight them. Not with words, not with bitterness. What I needed was to reclaim my dignity, quietly, with strength. I had been raised to be strong in silence, to endure, to make do with what I had. But I was no longer the woman who would simply fade into the background. I was the woman who would stand, not by making a scene, but by asserting my worth in the way I carried myself. I glanced at Sebastian out of the corner of my eye, still sitting beside me, still offering that quiet support. That's when it hit me. Sebastian. The name echoed in my mind like a distant memory, one I hadn't expected to resurface. This man beside me was no stranger. He was someone I had loved once, so many years ago. The memories flooded back, memories of a time before the weight of motherhood and sacrifice had consumed me. Before life had turned so complicated and harsh, we had shared laughter, dreams, and a quiet kind of love, until time and distance pulled us apart. I hadn't seen him in decades, not since he left for Europe, chasing his career. Seeing him now, sitting beside me at the wedding, I felt a surge of emotions, joy, regret, and even guilt. Why hadn't I let myself love him more back then? But there was no time for that now. This wasn't about the past. This was about me. He hadn't said much since he sat down, but his presence, his calm, reassuring presence spoke volumes. He wasn't here to make a scene, to show off who he was, or to overshadow anyone. He was here because, in this moment, he saw me for who I was. Not a woman stuck in the past, not a mother desperate for her son's approval, but someone worthy of respect, worthy of dignity. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need to seek validation from Bryce or Camille, or from anyone else in this room. The way I was treated at this wedding, the whispers, the seat in the back, it didn't define me. I defined me. Sebastian's role in all of this wasn't loud or obvious. He didn't step forward and demand the respect I was owed. Instead, he sat beside me, offering subtle guidance with every glance and every quiet word. His mere presence, the way he sat back, never flinching under the weight of the whispers, taught me something more powerful than any confrontation could. Seb didn't need to make a scene. He didn't need to demand attention. He showed me how to handle this with grace and strength. As the ceremony continued, I noticed the shift in the room. Guests who had once looked at me with disdain or indifference were now glancing our way, their eyes filled with curiosity. The pity I had seen in their eyes was slowly turning into something else, respect, perhaps, or at least an acknowledgement that I wasn't just a shadow in the back of the room. My son, Bryce, stood at the front, but his eyes kept drifting to us, unable to ignore the shift that was happening. His posture stiffened, and for the first time that day, I saw a flicker of unease in his face. He could feel it, tooth the change. His mother, the one who had always been invisible to him, the one he had pushed aside, was now surrounded by intrigue, by respect. It was as if the air around me had shifted, and I was no longer the woman who had to beg for a place at the table. I had taken that place for myself. Sebastian, without uttering a single word, had helped me see that. His quiet presence, his unwavering calm, reminded me that dignity didn't come from others, it came from within. As the wedding continued, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. I no longer felt small or invisible. I was reclaiming my dignity, not through confrontation or anger, but through the simple act of owning my place in this world. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't ashamed of who I was, where I came from, or what I had. I wasn't just sitting at the wedding, I was present, and that was enough. The wedding was over. The guests had all gone home, and the house was quiet against too quiet. I sat alone, the silence pressing against me, but I wasn't afraid of it anymore. The silence didn't feel like isolation now. It felt like a space where I could finally hear my own thoughts clearly. I thought about everything that had happened that day, the whispers, the pitying glances, the small humiliations that had been piled on me over the years. Today, I'd seen them for what they were. They didn't define me. I had allowed my son and his wife to push me aside, but I didn't have to let that happen anymore. Anger that had burned inside me during the ceremony had cooled into something else, something I hadn't expected. Clarity. I didn't want to confront Bryce or Camille right now. No, not yet. If I stood up in front of them, angry and emotional, I would give them the power to dismiss me. They would see me as a woman whose dignity was only skin deep, a woman who would break under pressure. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I chose to take a different path, one that was quiet, calculated, and, most importantly, one where I would be in control. I decided that I wouldn't confront them in a way they expected. I wasn't going to scream or beg for an apology. I was going to demand one, but in a way that they would have to acknowledge me. I filed for legal action. It wasn't the decision I had imagined making when I was younger. I had always thought that a mother's love for her son would be enough to win his respect. I never thought I would have to demand what should have been freely given, but I was tired of letting people walk all over me, of letting them treat me like I didn't matter. This wasn't about revenge. It was about standing up for myself in a world that had never truly seen me. The legal paperwork was simple. I didn't want anything from them, nothing material. I didn't care about their wealth, their status, or their social circles. I cared about one thing: respect. I demanded an apology, a public acknowledgement of the way they had treated me, and a promise that they would never again treat anyone, least of all me, with such disdain. I knew it would rattle them. I knew they wouldn't understand at first, but this wasn't about making them comfortable. This was about me taking back what was mine. As I signed the papers and handed them to the lawyer, I felt something stir inside me. It was power, not the kind of power that comes from money or influence, but the power that comes from owning your own story, your own truth. I wasn't just the woman who had been humiliated in row 14. I wasn't just the mother who had been dismissed. I was the one who called the shots now. And that realization that I had the power to choose my own path was freeing. For the first time, I felt truly empowered. The next few days were a blur. I went about my usual routine, working, making tea, tending to my garden, but there was a quiet confidence in my step that hadn't been there before. I no longer walked through the world with my head down, hoping not to be noticed. I walked with my head high, knowing that I had taken control of my life again. Sebastian called me that afternoon. I could tell from his voice that he knew what I had decided. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. I smiled, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm feeling good, Seb. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally in charge of my own life." He was silent for a moment, as if processing my words. "I'm proud of you, Mabel. You're doing this the right way. You've chosen to be the one who defines your worth." I didn't know how to explain it, but hearing him say that, hearing him recognize what I had done, felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. I wasn't defined by the whispers or the judgments of others. I was defined by my choices, and I had chosen to stand tall. As the days passed, I received the expected calls, messages from Bryce, from Camille, and even from Patricia. They wanted to meet. They wanted to talk, but I didn't need to meet with them right now. I had already made my choice, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid to stand alone. The fear that had gripped me for years, the fear of being abandoned, of losing my son, was fading. It had no hold on me anymore, because I had learned something powerful. I had learned that my dignity wasn't up for negotiation. The days stretched on, each one a little heavier than the last. As I waited, I knew what was coming, but the waiting still gnawed at me. Bryce and Camille had no idea that they were about to be forced to face the consequences of their actions. They continued with their lives, unbothered, assuming everything had settled. But I knew better. I had made my choice, and now they would have to reckon with it. The legal papers were filed, the wheels had been set in motion, and soon they would find out that this wasn't just about a seating arrangement at a wedding. It was about something deeper, about respect, about dignity, and about how long I had allowed myself to be dismissed. The day arrived faster than I expected. The event was a high-profile gala, a charity fundraiser for the city's children's hospital. Bryce and Camille were there, of course front and center, as always. The room buzzed with anticipation, filled with well-dressed guests, champagne glasses clinking, and soft music playing in the background. It was the kind of event where appearances mattered, where reputation was everything, and for Bryce and Camille, this was their world. But today, that world would be different. I arrived in silence, my steps slow but steady. I wasn't alone this time. Seb was by my side, his presence as calm as it had been at the wedding. But now there was a different energy between us. He wasn't just the man who had sat next to me at my son's wedding. He was now a quiet pillar, offering his support not just with words, but with a silent strength that reminded me I wasn't alone in this. The moment came when the host stood before the microphone, the crowd growing quiet in anticipation. Bryce and Camille were called to the front, their heads held high as they made their way toward the stage. The lights on them felt harsh, unforgiving, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of discomfort in Bryce's eyes. He knew what was coming. "Ladies and gentlemen," the host began, "we would like to take a moment to offer a public apology to Mrs. Mabel Carter, the mother of the groom, who, as some of you know, has been unfairly treated by certain members of our family." The words hit the air with a sharpness I wasn't prepared for. I didn't flinch. I didn't turn away. I stood still, my heart beating steadily, my hands clasped neatly in front of me. This was my moment. Bryce stepped forward, his face pale, his jaw tight. He cleared his throat and met my gaze for the first time that day. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, the words coming out more forced than genuine. "Mom," he began, the word tasting foreign on his tongue. I want to apologize for the way you were treated at the wedding. I know I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I should have defended you. I should have made sure you were treated with the respect you deserve." There it was, the apology I had waited for, but it didn't feel like a weight had lifted. I didn't feel the surge of satisfaction I had expected. Instead, I felt ... nothing. I looked at him, standing there, trying so hard to be the man he thought I wanted him to be, and I realized then this wasn't about me accepting his apology for my sake. It was about him finally seeing me for who I was, not the mother he had pushed aside, but a woman worthy of respect. Camille stood beside him, her face flushed, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter," she said, her voice quieter but still clear. "I was wrong to say the things I did, and I regret treating you with such disregard. You've always been a part of this family, and I was wrong to make you feel otherwise." The room was still, the guests unsure how to react. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for my response. This was the moment when I could have chosen to forgive them, to ease the tension with a smile or a kind word. But forgiveness, I realized, wasn't something I could give easily. Not yet. I stepped forward, taking the microphone. I met Bryce's eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt the power of my own presence. "I accept your apology," I said, my voice steady, calm. "But forgiveness is not a gift. It is a process. It takes time, and it takes sincerity. I'm not angry, but I am not ready to let you off the hook so easily." There was a moment of silence in the room, the weight of my words hanging in the air. Bryce swallowed hard, his face filled with a mix of guilt and confusion. Camille stood beside him, her lips pressed tightly together. I turned to face the crowd, the guests who had once whispered about me, the ones who had treated me like I didn't belong. I could see the shift in their eyes. The whispers had stopped. No longer did they look at me with pity or disdain. They were watching me with something else, now curiosity, respect, maybe even admiration. For the first time, I wasn't invisible. The power dynamic in this room had shifted. It wasn't just Bryce and Camille standing in the spotlight anymore. I was there, too. My presence, my silence, had commanded attention. The apology was a start. It wasn't enough to erase the years of mistreatment, but it was a beginning, and I wasn't going to rush it. I would allow them to show me that they truly understood what they had done. Actions, not words, would prove whether this apology meant anything at all. As I stepped back into the crowd, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I wasn't just the woman in row 14 anymore. I was the woman who stood tall, who commanded respect, not because I demanded it, but because I had earned it. The days following the apology were quiet, but they felt different. It wasn't just the silence in my home or the calm in my heart. There was something more, something I couldn't quite explain but felt deep inside. The air had shifted, and I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but I knew something had changed. Bryce and Camille had apologized, but I hadn't expected that to be the end of it. I had asked for something more: time, sincerity, and a true reckoning of what they had done. I had made it clear that forgiveness wasn't something you could rush. It was a journey, and I wasn't going to give it away so easily. In the days that followed, I watched them, not with anger, but with a quiet patience. It was in their actions that I would see if they truly understood what had happened, and little by little, I began to see the cracks in the armor they had built around themselves. Bryce, especially, seemed to be looking at me with new eyes. At first, there were awkward texts, messages that felt more like obligations than gestures of genuine connection. But over time, they became more thoughtful. He started calling more often, checking in not just to see if I was okay, but to ask how I was doing. One afternoon, as I was sitting on my porch, I saw him pull up in his car. He was alone, no sign of Camille. He stepped out, his face tired, as though he hadn't slept in days. I didn't move at first. I didn't want to rush him. This moment was his, not mine to push. He walked up slowly, his hands in his pockets, like he wasn't sure what to say. I saw that familiar uncertainty in his eyes, the same uncertainty I used to see when he was younger, and didn't know how to express himself. It made my heart ache, but I didn't let it show. "Mom," he said quietly when he reached the door, "can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. We didn't speak as he sat down, his gaze fixed on the floor. I let the silence stretch, knowing it was a space he needed to fill, not me. Finally, he looked up at me. "I've been thinking about everything you said at the event, about respect, about you." His voice faltered, but I didn't interrupt. I wanted him to say it, all of it, in his own time. I don't know why it took me so long to understand. I don't know why I didn't see you for who you really are, someone with your own life, your own struggles, your own dignity. There was a vulnerability in his voice, something I hadn't heard from him in years, and for the first time, I could feel him reaching out, not just as my son, but as someone who truly saw me. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice soft, but filled with the weight of sincerity. "I'm sorry for all the times I took you for granted, for all the times I didn't protect you. You're not just my mom, you're a woman who deserves respect, and I didn't give you that." I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't let the tears fall. This was his moment, his reckoning, not mine. He had finally come to see what I had known all along. I wasn't just a mother to him, I was a person, and I deserved the same respect he gave to others. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away," he continued, his eyes searching mine, "but I hope we can start again, from the beginning. Like you said, this isn't something that just happens overnight, but I want to do better, Mom. I want to be the son you deserve." I didn't say anything for a moment. What could I say? He had already said more than I expected. I had always dreamed of hearing those words from him, but hearing them now, in this quiet moment, felt like a kind of victory. Not for me, but for us, for the future we could rebuild. "I'm proud of you, Bryce," I said softly, my voice steady, "but this is just the beginning. The road ahead is long, and you'll have to show me, not with words, but with actions, that you truly understand what you've said." He nodded, his eyes bright with determination. "I will, Mom, I promise." As he left, I stood at the door watching him walk back to his car. I didn't rush to follow him. I didn't need to chase him anymore. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as his mother, but as me, a woman who had finally been given the respect she deserved. I sat down in my favorite chair, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. It wasn't just about the apology, it was about what had come after, about the change that had started to take place, not just in my son, but in me. I had chosen to stand up for myself. I had chosen to take control of my own story. And now, finally, I could see the fruits of that decision. My dignity was no longer a fragile thing that could be taken from me. It was unshakable, solid, and mine to keep. this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new era, one where I was no longer defined by the actions of others, but by my own choices, my own strength. And for the first time, I felt at peace with that asterisk. The days have become quieter now, calmer. My home feels more like a sanctuary than a place of hiding, and I've learned to appreciate the stillness. It's strange, this peace, after years of living in the noise of disappointment and neglect. As I sit here, watching the evening light stretch across my garden, I realize I've walked away from something, a past that tried to define me, a history that wanted to hold me down. But I'm not that woman anymore. I used to think I was tied to that past, the woman in row 14, forgotten and humiliated. I carried that weight with me every day, like an invisible chain I couldn't escape. For so long, I believed it defined me, that the way my family saw me was the way I was meant to stay. But the truth is, I never had to carry that burden. It was never mine to begin with. The humiliation, the regret, all of it. I've learned to let it go. I don't need to keep dragging the past behind me like a heavy cloak that weighs me down. I am free now, free to walk away from the things that no longer serve me, free to embrace the person I am today, not the one others tried to make me be. My son Bryce has tried. I can see it now, the effort, the sincerity behind his words. He wants to make things right, and I know he's trying to understand. But forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't something you can rush. It's a process, and it doesn't happen overnight. I see the change in him. I feel it when he calls, when he visits, when he speaks to me with a new kind of respect. It's not perfect yet. We're not perfect yet, but we're learning. And in time, I know, we'll find our way back to each other. But for now, I can't rush that. I won't rush that. Not when I'm still learning how to forgive myself for the years I spent invisible to my own worth. I'm giving myself that space to heal, to see him for who he truly is now, not just the boy I raised, but the man he's becoming. The journey hasn't been easy, and there are days when the weight of everything still feels like it might swallow me whole. But those days are fewer now. They're becoming less frequent, because, with each passing moment, I am learning to stand taller, to stand for myself. Not just for the family I thought I was supposed to hold together. And here, at this point in my life, I know that I am no longer the woman sitting in the back of the room. I'm not the woman in row 14, hidden away behind service areas and whispers. I'm front and center now, and not because I've demanded it, but because I've earned it. There's something powerful in that realization. It's not about the apology I received from my son, or the way others have come to see me differently. It's about me seeing myself differently. It's about knowing my worth, not because someone else tells me, but because I've decided it. I've worked hard for it. I've fought for it. And I've learned that self-respect isn't something anyone can give to you. It's something you have to claim for yourself. No one can bargain with yourself. No amount of money, no amount of prestige or recognition can make you feel whole if you don't believe in your own value. And it's not a one-time decision. It's something you have to choose every single day. I've learned that respect isn't a gift that's handed out when you meet certain conditions. It's something that must be earned, and not just from others. It's earned from within. It's earned by the way you carry yourself, by the choices you make, by how you treat yourself and others. I'm not perfect. None of us are. I still have moments when I doubt myself, when the old fears creep back in, when I wonder if my family will ever fully understand me. But those moments don't control me anymore. They don't define me. What defines me now is my ability to stand tall, to own my space, and to demand the respect I've always deserved. I think back to that moment when I sat in row 14, the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down on me, and I can't help but smile now, because I know that woman is gone. She's a part of my past, and I've left her there. I'm not bound by the chains of others' opinions anymore. The woman who sat in row 14 has been replaced by a woman who knows her own worth, a woman who has learned that dignity is not for sale. It cannot be bargained for, nor can it be given as a gift. It is earned every single day through the way we choose to live our lives and the way we choose to stand up for ourselves. And that is a lesson I will carry with me for the rest of my days. Because once you know your own worth, once you understand that respect must be earned and maintained, nothing, not a seat at the back of a wedding, not the whispers of a family too busy to see you, nothing can take your dignity away. I've walked away from the past. I've left behind the woman who was dismissed. And now, I walk forward into a new beginning, where I am seen for who I truly am, not just as someone's mother, but as me, a woman who stands tall, no longer waiting to be noticed, but already standing in the light. As I stand here, looking out at the garden, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun, I can't help but feel a sense of peace settle over me. The past, with all its pain and humiliation, is no longer my anchor. It's just a chapter, a story I've left behind. The woman who once sat in row 14, hidden away, is gone. She's been replaced by someone else, a woman who chooses her own path, who stands in her own light, no longer defined by what others think or say. For the first time in my life, I feel free, free from the weight of expectations, free from the need to prove my worth to anyone. This is my new beginning, and it's mine to shape. I've spent so many years thinking that my value came from what others saw in me, from being the perfect mother, the dutiful wife, the one who always sacrificed for everyone else. But now I realize that my value comes from me. It comes from my ability to choose my own path, to live on my own terms, to no longer be bound by anyone else's opinions. And that path is a path I'm ready to walk alone, but not entirely alone. Sebastian has been a quiet presence throughout this journey, always offering a steady hand when I needed it, but never pushing, never demanding. And now, he's offering me something more. He's offering me a chance to leave it all behind, everything Tuscany. He had said to me one evening, his eyes warm with the promise of a new adventure, "There's a little village I've always wanted to visit. I think you'll like it. No expectations, no past, just a chance to start again. What do you think?" At first, I hesitated. My life, my routine, my home, everything was here. How could I leave all that behind? But then I realized something. I wasn't leaving because I was running away from something. I was leaving because I was choosing something. I was choosing a life filled with new possibilities, a life where fear and self-doubt no longer had a hold on me. And so, I said yes. Now, as I stand here, packing my bags, I feel the weight of the decision settle in my chest, not as fear, but as excitement. This is what it feels like to choose yourself, to choose the life you want, not the one others expect from you. I take one last look at my home, the place where I raised my son, where I spent so many years trying to make everyone else happy. It's been a good home, but it's also been a reminder of the woman I was, the woman I've outgrown. And as I close the door behind me, I feel the finality of that chapter. I'm ready to move forward. The future is waiting, and I'm walking toward it with my head held high. No more living in the shadows. No more feeling like I don't belong. I belong here, in my own life. And wherever that life takes me, I know I will be okay. As I step out into the world, the road ahead is wide open, and for the first time, I am not afraid. This story of resilience and redemption isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's ever been made to feel small. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every day is a chance to reclaim your dignity, to stand tall in the face of adversity, and to choose the life you deserve. Comment below with your own experiences of standing up for yourself. How did you find the strength to walk away from the past and embrace the future? And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be a part of this journey of healing, empowerment, and new beginnings. We're all in this together.